right, I am seeing folks joining here, and my clock is showing 11:30. So I'm going to go ahead and welcome our guest, Joel, to the stage, and I will stop sharing my screen so that we can focus on our event today. Hello, everybody. My name is Brinton Botkin. I use she, her pronouns, and I lead student marketing efforts here at Handshake. Part of that fun and fabulous work is doing these events with you to spotlight cool career paths and interesting perspectives in the world of early careers. So really excited to be here today. A couple of quick housekeeping notes before we get started. We are super excited to have about 20 minutes of guided discussion to kick us off. Then we'll save about 10 minutes at the end of the session for Q&A. So if you have any questions today over the course of the session, please feel free to pop those into the chat. And we will be taking note of those questions throughout the session. I do have a couple of Handshake colleagues, Emily and Paul, who are on the line as well, who will be here to support. You might see Emily in the chat sharing some resources. So please feel free to use the chat, share any questions that you have for myself or for Joel, and we will get to some of those at the end. But in the meantime, we are so excited because we know that fall recruitment is underway, and it can be really daunting to see different openings across a ton of different industries, different types of roles. And in order to help folks feel more confident in their job search, we have kicked off this Career Spotlight series to get folks firsthand accounts of some of the different positions that are available out there. And today's panelist is my fabulous colleague, Joel, who is a software engineer here at Handshake. Joel, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a bit about the projects that you're currently working on?
I'd be happy to. Thank you, Brenton. I'm super excited to be here with you all. So my name is Joel J. Pratt. I am a software engineer here at Handshake. A little background on me, I live in San Francisco. And outside of engineering, you might catch me doing a little bachata. At Handshake, I am on the content and community team. That is basically our social platform. So where folks can post content. I think, I work on a variety of things for the content platform. Most recently working on allowing employers to post job related content. So stay tuned for what that might look like in the future, hopefully soon.
Amazing. Fun preview for what folks can expect to see on Handshake coming soon. Joel, I know that you have had quite an interesting career journey. We've heard from several panelists over the course of this Career Spotlight series that at one point or another pivoted their career. And I would love to hear a little bit about your background and your decision to change direction and move towards software engineering. Do you mind giving us some background there?
Absolutely. So Brenton is talking about how I was a social worker, and now I'm a software engineer. So the sort of like short version of the story is I was a psychology major in undergrad, and then decided to go into social work and worked in group homes and foster care before I decided to become a software engineer. That was a very short version of each one of those chapters, but largely the inspiration was twofold for pivoting into engineering. First, I love social work. Still a lot that I miss about it, and I felt like working with young people and seeing them learn and grow and in meaningful ways. It's like there is nothing like that. But one of the things that I wanted to do was have an impact on a larger scale. So in therapy, you're sort of working with one person at a time, and I wanted to be able to do something that could impact hundreds, thousands, maybe even millions, right? And then second was sort of more on just sort of like an experience note, just like I didn't have much exposure to tech when I was growing up. It's unfortunately pretty common in my community. And so like even when I went to college, I went to a liberal arts school. We didn't even have a computer science major. So just didn't have access. And once I was a little bit older, and as tech was becoming more accessible, online training and self-teaching and stuff like that, realized that like there were there were opportunities where I could learn on my own. And so even though I didn't take a traditional path engineering, it was like it was doable. And so once that was like once I realized it was a possibility, then it was just about about putting in the work. So yeah.
Amazing. And I would love to hear, on paper, I would say social work and software engineering are very, very, very different career paths. But has your background in social work kind of informed your career in software engineering in any way? Are there any skills that you found that you cultivated as a social worker that have been relevant or helpful in your work as a software engineer? Can you talk a little about the transferable skills there?
Yeah, there's a little bit different, right? Uh, no, definitely significant differences for sure in these career paths. Um, I do feel like a lot of what I learned in social work informs not just like what I do in my career, but sort of what I do as a human. I think very much so working with people, working with groups was very valuable. The thing about engineering that's interesting, it's in my opinion, it is a lot more it's a lot more team and collaboration oriented than I think it is given credit for. I guess in some of the like the mainstream narratives where you sort of have this like one sole engineer in a corner, creating crazy things. Maybe that happens in some places, but that's not how I've seen it anywhere that I have been as an engineer. So I find like my ability to really like think through team dynamics and also like have difficult conversations. Like engineers are emotional just like everybody else. So I think that it's been helpful to be, even if I'm not, difficult conversations are hard. I'm not saying I'm like just great at it, right? But like I'm not afraid of it, right? Like I think it really helps to sort of like be able to engage at that level. I will say though, Brenton, like yeah, not everything is applicable, right? Like there was a real cost to sort of pivoting, and I don't put my social work skills, on my resume when I'm applying to jobs and say, hey, like look at these valuable, I think it comes across more when people are engaging with me and on a team basis, and so it's been valuable for me, but I do think when you pivot, you're accepting a certain amount of amount of loss and skill, but also for it's for what you're going to gain in the new thing. So
Yeah, I think that's such an important perspective, and you cultivated soft skills and often, the interpersonal things that will help you in any career path, right? Exposure to having difficult conversations. I think sometimes people enter a career path and have no exposure to having difficult conversations. And so that's a really important piece of your journey. But to your point, might not necessarily be something that lives on your resume as you're navigating your software engineering career. Okay, I want to make sure that I quickly emphasize to the folks in the channel, not channel, this isn't Twitch, I'm not streaming on Twitch right now, but to folks in the chat, like we don't have a dedicated Q&A box. If you've been in some of our events previously, you might have used a Q&A box, but right now you can use the chat to submit your questions. I'm seeing some folks are asking questions already, and we will make sure to get to some of those at the end. But Joel, I would love to, I know our audience is quite eager to hear about your role as a software engineer. Do you have an average day to day? And if so, can you talk about what that looks like?
I think you kind of hinted at it, Brenton. Not really. I think it depends on the time of year, on the product that I'm working on, and the project that I'm working on. The way that I try to do it is I like to focus in the morning. I feel like when I'm the freshest is when I can like do my best work, and I like sort of big blocks of focus time, especially like when I'm coding. So I try, not always succeed at this, but I try to focus, have some heads down time in the mornings, and then meetings will start, and I'll end up in meetings for a decent amount of my day, honestly, more than I would like. But it's
Preach.
a part
I feel
of the
the same
job.
way.
Yeah, right. And then I'll usually do some mix of like of paired programming or collaboration with engineers, but also with other stakeholders like product and design. And then when things die down a little bit later in the day, I'll try to have some more focused coding time, and I'll be doing coding stuff, in between, throughout that. But if you can't tell, I really value like my blocks, my chunks of coding time. But yeah, I'd say that's a typical day.
Awesome. I relate too much to the amount of your day spent in meetings. I think that maybe that's a certain level of seniority problem or a handshake thing, but we like our meetings around here. So protecting that focus time, I think, is really important. You talked a little bit about making the pivot. I'm seeing some questions coming through about the logistics of that pivot. But when you were first starting out as a software engineer, did you face any kind of challenges on that journey, and how did you overcome those challenges?
No, it was all easy. It was easy peasy, Brenton. I just jumped right in.
Very, yeah.
No big deal. Oh man, so many challenges. I think the biggest one, like, sort of started with me, and that was definitely imposter syndrome. I call it the imposter monster because I feel like it's like sometimes you just like you're chugging along and everything seems fine, and it's like this imposter monster just jumps out and gets you. That was a real challenge. I remember like just because when I started from scratch, right? Like, and I remember looking at my LinkedIn and like being like, man, if I wanted to do something in social work or even maybe like community organizing or something, like lots of resources, lots of people, and engineering was like, yeah, I did have one, which was my brother, which was good to have, definitely, very much so. But I remember that sort of like symbolized like this, building an entire network from scratch, right? And how did I overcome it? Well, one, like it just one step at a time, right? And I think that I the more that I learned and the more that I connected with people who were doing similar things, the more I felt like I could see myself belonging in that space. I don't know, overcome is like maybe a stretch for me because if we're talking about like imposter syndrome, like it's not has not gone away. So if you thought like you'd wake up magically one day and just you be 100% confident and never deal with imposter syndrome, well, maybe it will happen for you, but that's not for me. But I think, yeah, taking things one step at a time, also focusing on growth and focusing on my growth, not someone else's, was really big. I mean, even now, like I'm deeply humbled by some of the engineers that I work with on a daily basis. And if I compared myself to them, I'd feel very inadequate.
Yeah.
But that's not the comparison, right? For me, the comparison is, am I better than the Joel from yesterday, right? Like, and maybe I slipped up today, so maybe give it a couple days, whatever, right? Like, but am I getting better, right? And if I can do that and see myself growing, then I can kind of build on that momentum, right?
Yeah.
And again, just like the community aspect, I think is huge. Don't Going it alone, man, is brutal. So if you have folks that are supporting you, when inevitably you might find it hard to support yourself, then you can get through it.
I see a lot of people relating to you in the chat. That imposter monster comes for many of us, and I think it's validating, but also relatable that you're still dealing with that, even as you've kind of built your career in software engineering. The comparison game is rough. So I love the idea of competing against yourself, not competing against the people around you. We've gotten quite a few questions around your pivot. I know we're going to save some time in the Q&A at the end. But I think a lot of folks who are in the chat are curious about your advice for aspiring engineers who are tuning in today about how to land that first job or internship. Do you have any guidance for folks who are kind of early on in the career search process?
Yeah. Um, there's a there's a lot. I won't get too tactical. I think go for it, right? So I think the tough part, especially with the first job or first internship, is you're doing a lot from scratch, and you don't necessarily have the confidence that you can build on like past successes, right? But that's okay. You want to like you have done things, so like one, just like like if you don't know, like if you haven't like written it all down, if it's not on your resume, like go through all of the things that you have done and like whatever the project is, if it's a personal project, open source, like whatever it is, right? Like focus on the classes that you've taken, like you have done valuable things, right? So like focus on those and build on the things that you have done and be ready to speak to them powerfully. I really encourage folks to get out there and interview. There's like I played sports growing up, and there's nothing like game time. So get out there. Do I would encourage like simulate the game as well, right? So do practice interviews. Again, I think that's like the community thing. Try to get a core group of folks that you can practice interviews, do interview prep and stuff like that with. But maybe don't wait until you feel like you're completely ready to interview. Like I feel like if you've waited till you feel completely ready, you probably waited a little too long. Now do prepare, right? Like work on your skills, be technically strong, all that stuff, right? But stretch yourself, right? I think the interview process is a learning process. I think it's really valuable. Not just I know you the like the feeling is like, oh, can anybody like take who's gonna take me? Can I just get my foot in the door? But you're actually going to be learning a lot about the type of company that you want to be at, the type of work that you're going to be doing through the interview process. And I really encourage you to like interview them just as much as they are interviewing you, because as much as you'll be happy to sort of get your foot in the door, you're probably going to be at this place that you're for years, and you're going to give them a lot of your time, effort, and energy. And so you want to make sure that you're making the right investment for you. um, yeah, and then again, like the community thing, like just when you get, not if but when you get rejected, you have folks that are going to be there to support you, because believe me, it happens to all of us. And it's not about you not being enough or anything like that. It's just a part of the process, so make sure you have support to get through that.
Yeah, I wanna, like, underline, bold, emphasize, like, interviews go both ways. You as the candidate should also be assessing this employer. I think that's so important, Joel. And we got a couple of questions following up there that we'll save for the Q&A as well. But, one of the things that I hear a lot and that I'm also seeing reflected in the chat is, we get a lot of questions about balancing personal projects and work experience that might not necessarily feel related to the jobs that you're applying for, right? Do you have any best practices when it comes to developing your resume as an early career software engineer? Like the types of skills that you would recommend maybe before somebody gets an actual software engineering role put on their resume, or projects to highlight?
Yeah, I mean, first I would say don't overthink it. Just like do things that are interesting to you. If you have a personal project that you find, it's like do it, right? Like if there's a company or like a small business or even a friend or something that's like, hey, can you build something for me? And that's not like do it. I think it's all valuable, right? And then look at what you've done and try to find the value in it and try to learn how to articulate that to someone else. One specific thing that I'm a big fan of is open source projects. I think they can be a good way to simulate what real world development is like, because you're contributing to a code base you're not just the only person working on it. It's public, so folks can see it. You can share it with employers, potential employers, and things like that. And you'll get feedback, like when you're submitting a PR to an open source project, right? Like someone's going to review that, which is much more like what you'll experience in like day-to-day development. Um, and it might be a little bit daunting, right? Like that you're contributing to something that folks are actually using. But I think that's good, right? Like, cause yeah, like when you're shipping code, it's like, hey, like if it breaks, it's on me. Like that, that is real. So I encourage folks to consider open source, but just do just do all the things, like whatever it is that you are interested in, like just build stuff. And I think you'll see the value in it and be able to extract the value as you're continuing to build.
I love that advice. And I saw Myarion asked a question about where you learned GitHub and open sourcing, maybe building the confidence to jump into those open source projects. Yeah, do you have any recommendations for how to decide which projects to jump into? Is it just, should you go into what's most interesting?
Yeah, I would just say, yeah, whatever is more interesting to you. I think if you're like just if you like, there's online resources. I think I started learning GitHub when I started. I did online courses, like an intro to programming course through Udacity. But there's, if you wanted to do something formal, like there's online courses and stuff, or there's free stuff that you can sort of like learn GitHub. Um, I would say, yeah, whatever is interesting to you, do it. If it's a big project and you think it's a little bit daunting to actually contribute to it, one sort of trick that I've heard people will do is like try to find a typo in like a README or something like that,
Mm,
and then fix it. And that way you'll have to submit a PR, right, to fix that typo. But it's simple, right? There's a missing T or whatever, right? And that can be a little bit more approachable on like a bigger project. But
yeah.
even then, if it's not like a typo in a README, like find something super small to get started, or find a smaller open source project, and it should be a little bit less daunting. And maybe last thing, you could also create your own open source project. Um, I would say maybe with a group of folks, maybe 2 or 3 people. But that's another way to go about it too.
I love that. And I'm seeing some love for the typo suggestion in the chat. As an editor and a writer who makes a hobby of finding typos in published books, I highly recommend going in and finding typos and fixing them on GitHub. I love that idea. I have a whole folder of screenshots of typos that I find in the wild, and it's one of my favorite things to do. Amazing. So I know we want to save some time for the Q&A. If you could go back to the beginning of your career and tell yourself one thing, what would that thing be?
Just one thing. The one thing would sort of be like, it's gonna be all right, like it's gonna be fine. And sort of underneath that, I think would be just take just take the next step. It is really hard, as I have learned, to sort of know where the end of this journey is going to actually be. I did not like set out to be an engineer. I had no idea. I barely even set out to be a social worker. I I mean, for folks, even for like additional context, like because as most of you are in school, I was a psychology major. I didn't take a psychology class until my first semester sophomore year. So I ended up doing the whole major in 3 years, and that was not by design at all. I remember just like I was in the library over the summer, and I was looking at courses that were interesting, and it was like a bunch of them kept being psych courses, and like I sort of ended up just following what was interesting to me at the time, and I like kind of worked out so like take whatever the next step is, whatever that thing is. Maybe it's something that you feel passionate about, maybe it's something that you're excited about, something that's interesting, or maybe it's just something that you think like strategically makes sense, right? Like there's different reasons, right, for all of these things. But if you feel like you have like a strong reason to do something, like do it, right? And then figure out what the next step is from there. And maybe you keep building on one step that you took, or maybe the next step is going to be a bit different than the previous one, right? But I think you'll sort of know that when we get to it. So just take it one step at a time, but make sure you keep taking steps.
Yeah, I think baby steps are still steps, and that's a great thing. Okay, I'm going to do my best to get to as many questions as I can. I'm going to also take some of the themes that I'm seeing from several questions and maybe try to answer them in one question. One of the things
Sure.
I saw quite early on when you were talking about your pivot from social work into software engineering is how did you teach yourself software engineering? You mentioned that there wasn't a computer science major at your school. Were there any resources that you really focused on while you were kind of building that skill set and developing your technical expertise?
Yep. I'm gonna try to go quick too to get through as many. So I started self-teaching with free online resources. Then I did online courses at Udacity. Then I became a mentor at Udacity for their online courses, and then ultimately did a boot camp. Really wanted to be a part of community, so that's why I did the boot camp.
Amazing.
And I did Codesmith was the boot camp, if
Code
folks are wondering. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. We also have a couple of different flavors of a question around being concerned that the market for software engineers is really saturated right now, and there's a lot of people who want to get into tech. Do you have any kind of tips for breaking in and making a good impression in the interview process?
Nothing outside of sort of like be play to your strengths. Like what's going to make you stand out is what you are like, uniquely good at. You know that better than anybody else. And I don't think it has to be some crazy thing like, oh, what makes me unique? No, just like what am I interested in? What am I confident in? Focus on that. And I think it'll help you stand out.
Okay, I'm gonna rapid fire. What coding languages do you work in? Do you have any favorites?
Ruby on Rails, React/JavaScript, and more recently Golang. Nope, I don't have a favorite coding language. I have my favorite language is the right language for the job.
Speaking of jobs, we had a couple of people ask, do you have any examples of something that you've built or something they're proud of participating as an engineer?
I really am proud of the working on the content and community platform. I'm one of the features that I built was being able to create image posts, which was like in the very, very, very early days. We only could create videos. I think image posts are some of the most creative posts, and so very proud that we can do that.
And I'm going to use this as a homework assignment for everybody who's on the call here. After you're done on this part of Handshake, you should pop over to the feed and post an image post and share what you
100%.
share what your favorite part of this event was. I think that would be a really great way to give some kudos to Joel for his time today. Okay, did you have to do any types of leak code problems for your interviews, or do you have any technical interview practice tips for folks in the chat?
I do have tips. I mean, I've seen like a wide range of types of interviewing. Some interview questions that are super data structure algorithm heavy, and some that are very much so build this React that. You can't control necessarily what you're going to get, so try to be as prepared for as much as you can, or focus on whatever it is that you want to focus on. And then like, hey, if you get things that are outside of your wheelhouse, then like that's not the job for you, right? But you'll know, okay, I'm gonna knock the React building, React that, interviews out of the park. Kind of your choice on that. The biggest tip, like I said earlier, is game time. Like get game time reps. So interview as much as possible and do as many practice interviews as possible.
Love it. Let's stick to the interview topic because we've gotten a couple of questions on that as well. You mentioned using the interviews, maybe not necessarily feeling 100% confident going into interviews and using them as a learning experience for the industry, for the job, for the career path. Were you ever potentially leaving a poor impression as you were still in that learning through interviews process? And how did you kind of combat any fear around engaging in interviews before you felt 100% confident?
Oh, yeah, 100%. Like, and I'm sure I left some bad impressions. I don't, I am where I am, right? Like, and I think more than anything, it's about you doing the best that you can from where you are. Sometimes it's just not a good fit. Sometimes it's not about you being bad or them being good or whatever. Like, it is not. People looking for different things, right? And that's a part of the process. So, yep, you're gonna leave some interviews feeling like, man, I bombed that. Sometimes you might be feeling like you bombed it, and then you find out like, hey, actually, they like what I did. Sometimes not, right? That's just a part of it. So just if you keep getting the reps, you'll keep growing, and I feel like the growth is really the key.
I think that is a perfect note to end on. I just got a warning that our meeting time is up in 1 minute, and I want to wrap us here. Thank you so much, Joel, for taking the time to share about your career path, your advice for fighting that imposter monster. I think I'm going to take some of that away with me as well. And thank you for giving us your time here. For everybody in the chat, if you have 30 seconds to fill out our feedback survey that was just shared in the chat, please go ahead and do that so that we can bring you more events like this in the future. And you can follow us on Handshake for more events and announcements in the future. And don't forget to go and post on the Handshake feed about your favorite moment from today, and use the fantastic tools that Joel has built for us. So that is going to be it for today. Thank you, everybody, and I hope you have a fabulous weekend if you're heading into a weekend here.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. Bye.